So I usually journal and I do like as deep of a dive as I can before I have someone on so I can feel super prepared. And what I see the most pop up when it comes to your work, or you in general, is like this mass triggering of people when it comes to their relationship with jealousy. And I've always thought that jealousy is so interesting in our culture because we want to regulate all of our other emotions, whether it's anger, you don't want to just like go punch someone in the face because you aren't regulated. But when it comes to jealousy, it seems like it's one of the only ones that can be left unbridled. And
Mm.
I'm just like curious why, I guess, why is it still here? Because we have all of these fitness payoffs. So jealousy is there for a reason. And does that go against the potential idea that we're not wired for monogamy?
Well, I'd question the premise a little bit. Just because something exists doesn't mean it's there for a reason in
Mhm.
terms of evolutionary theory, right? There's no good reason for multiple sclerosis or cancer or, stroke or any of these other things. So many things exist both in the physical and the psychological realm that don't necessarily fulfill an evolutionary purpose. Uh, I think you make a really interesting point, though, that jealousy seems to be exceptional in the sense that there's a sort of widely accepted view that if you have a reason to be jealous, then there's a justification for
Mhm.
whatever ridiculous behavior results from that. And in some countries, crimes of passion are still, that's still considered a legal defense, right? My
Whoa.
wife fucked someone else. I killed them. Well, you get it, right, Judge? Yeah, yeah. And, like in Italy, I think it's still considered a legal defense.
Oh God.
Um, from my perspective, jealousy is an expression of insecurity,
Mm.
right? And I think, circling around to the way you phrased the question, I do think that insecurity fulfills some sort of evolutionary function. So, on a very basic general level, you look at a cat lying in the sun in the window, and another cat comes along and wants to push that cat out and take its spot. And then there's a little fight there, right? Well, it's certainly natural for us to want to keep something that we value, not to lose it. I think that our ancestors learned that the best way to keep things of value was to share them. And we live in a society that tells us that the best way to keep things of value is to jealously guard them. So, you know, this jealousy as a response to potentially threatening sexual partners or attraction is very much a culturally mitigated response. And I think the central argument of Sex at Dawn was to look at the anthropological and primatological and physiological evidence and say, well, this impulse of wanting to protect what we value, that is natural. That is a universal human trait, even a universal mammalian trait, possibly, it extends into insects and all living things. I don't know. But certainly among mammals, that's a universal trait. Now, how that manifests is culturally mitigated. And our culture, as I said, teaches us, save for a rainy day, don't throw good money after bad, don't take care of strangers. It's a waste of money. Invest your resources very carefully. And, but other cultures that exist right now see things very differently. My ex-wife and co-author of Sex at Dawn, Casilda, grew up in Mozambique. And when we were working on the book, she reminded me of an expression she had heard a lot growing up, which is that the best place to store extra food is in your friend's stomach,
Mm.
right? Now, that's a culture that has no refrigeration, or at least not much in the villages in Mozambique. And obviously, our ancestors didn't have refrigeration. So there wasn't an option of storing food in a deep freezer, for a rainy day or a day when you didn't have any food. So what did you do? You shared food with the people around you. And when they have extra food, they share it with you. So it makes perfect sense in that kind of society, right? And then you move into our society with technology and refrigeration. And obviously, this is a metaphor for much deeper things, but you can see how different, even economic contexts would shape the same impulse in very different ways.
Mhm. So, I guess when it comes to facing your jealousy and overcoming it, this is a question I get a lot from people, and it's very hard for me to articulate, but, like, how do you go about reframing or integrating that into a more healthy version of, protecting what is valuable or cherishing what is valuable, but not looking at relationships of a means of possessiveness or competition or ownership?
Well, I think that a healthy dose of humility is important, right? Like a lot of people say, well, if I let my partner be attracted to other people and express that openly, then I might lose them.
Mhm,
The premise is totally wrong there. You
mhm,
might lose them anyway,
mhm,
right? So let's just start with some reality here, which is that nobody controls anyone else.
mhm.
If your partner wants to leave you, they're going to leave you unless got them in a cage in the basement, like uh,
Yes,
beyond that kind of
exactly.
thing. Yeah. Beyond like serious criminal behavior, there's no way that you are going to control another human's decisions. So let's start there and say, okay, there's always a risk that your partner's going to leave you. Now, what do we do? Is it safer and smarter and more ethical to acknowledge the reality of your partner's consciousness, your partner's autonomy, your partner's biological reality, and your own, and start from that? Or is it a smarter strategy to just pretend none of this is happening and ignore the problem, right? So is
Mhm,
it smarter to go to the doctor and get checked up when you've got some pain, or is it smarter to just say, no, I'm going to ignore the pain and it'll go away? Well, obviously, we know it's smarter to get it checked, right? It's
mhm,
smarter to face your problems, to face your insecurities. That's definitely a better if there's water coming through the roof, do you ignore it or do you go fix the roof? You take a look at the roof. So, in every other area of life, we acknowledge that we should be looking at the possibility and always be cognizant of the possibility of problems and address those problems when we see them, except in relationships where a lot of people say, no, no, my strategy is to pretend everything's awesome, to hide my own reality, to lie about my own desires, my own feelings, my own discontent, whatever it is, my own fantasies, and then everything will be great. Well, that's a really stupid approach to life in general and relationships specifically.
No, I 100% agree, and it's interesting because I feel the more control and this kind of invisible leash that you put on your partner, it's kind of creating a false relation like, a false projection of the relationship, like, it only exists perfectly in this vacuum, but if you were to actually allow it to behave in such a way that it's just going to organically, then, again, like, that fear comes in or that loss or abandonment or whatever it is, so it's like by the more we're both kind of pretending at this thing, the more it's further away from what it actually is.
And can't go anywhere, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're not showing your true self to your partner, what does it mean when he or she says I love you? What does that
Exactly.
mean? They don't know you. So
Mhm.
what do they love? They love some weird charade that you're playing for them, right? They love this
Mhm.
highly edited, very filtered, shaped to what you think they want to hear kind of view of you. That's not you, right?
Mhm.
So if you put yourself in that position, you cannot receive love from anyone because you're not letting anyone see you. So
And it's
it's
not loving yourself either.
exactly,
Mhm.
because it's all based on shame.
Mhm.
I
Oh
remember
my
one
gosh.
time, shortly after Sex at Dawn came out, I was in Australia, and I remember I'd come down to the lobby of the hotel to do an interview with somebody, and I was sitting there waiting for this journalist to show up, and is this big lobby, hundreds of people walking around. And I saw this really sexy woman walking through the lobby, and I was watching her walk across, and all these people are sort of checking her out. And there's this couple like sort of opposite side of the room from me. So they came into my view, and it was so funny because I could see the dude definitely saw the woman walking across, pretended he didn't. The wife saw the woman, saw the guy see her, saw the guy pretending he didn't see her. And it was just like, this is so layered and complex. This festival of fucking nonsense here. Like, what would have been the problem to just say, wow, sexy woman walking across the lobby? Like, what is the problem there? It's like I could not be in a relationship with a woman who was trying to force me to pretend not to notice women. It's like, oh, am I allowed to look at the sunset? Am I allowed to notice the
Mhm.
stars in the sky? What the fuck are we doing here? It's ridiculous.
I couldn't agree more. It's like you like a Picasso, so you better not fucking like a Van Gogh. Like you
Right.
have to suddenly pretend that beauty only exists in one channel and one channel alone. And again, it's going at your relationship just from a foundation of bullshit, a foundation of lies. And is that how vulnerable and fragile you want that relationship to be? Whereas if it's tested at that floor level of just appreciating a beautiful woman walking across the room, that all of a sudden your relationship is in shambles. That makes zero sense to me. It's almost like you're creating that abandonment that you're trying to avoid.
Precisely. Precisely.